Welcome to the Deep Dive. We help you get smarter faster, by extracting these golden nuggets of wisdom from books. Today, we're diving into Words That Change Minds. It's by Shelle Rose Charvet. This book, it's like a secret decoder ring almost, for understanding communication styles, and that could be so valuable, whether you're leading a team, or you're negotiating a deal, or even just trying to have a more productive conversation with your partner. Before we jump in though, don't forget to check out the show notes for links to download those study notes from the book and also the audiobook. And if you enjoy this deep dive, please hit that like button, share it with your friends. Let's spread the knowledge. Okay, so Words That Change Minds. It introduces us to the LAB profile, which stands for Language and Behavior Profile. And I know some of you might be thinking, oh no, not another personality test, but hold on, this is different. The LAB profile. It's based on the principles of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which explores how our brains actually process language and how that shapes our behaviors and, our interactions.
And what's really interesting about the LE profile is it's not about putting people in boxes or labeling them. It recognizes that people's communication styles, they're fluid, they're context dependent. So how you communicate at work might be completely different from how you communicate with your family or friends, even if it's the same person.
That makes a lot of sense. So we all have different communication costumes we wear depending on the situation. So the book breaks down these communication patterns into 14 different categories, each revealing insights into how people get motivated, how they make decisions, and how they process information. But I think the best way to really grasp these patterns is to dive into some specific examples. So let's start with one of the foundational patterns, level. This one is all about whether someone is more proactive or reactive, and Words That Change Minds. It uses some really vivid scenarios to illustrate this. So imagine you're in a brainstorming session, and the team hits a roadblock. The proactive person, they're immediately jumping in, suggesting solutions, ready to take action. But the reactive person, they take a step back. They're analyzing the problem from different angles before offering any ideas.
Exactly. And neither approach is better or worse. They're just different. And understanding these patterns helps you tailor your communication for better collaboration. So if you're working with someone who's highly proactive, they'll appreciate a direct, action-oriented approach. But if you're dealing with someone who's more reactive, you might need to give them more time and space to process before expecting a decision.
This makes me wonder, where do you think you fall on that proactive-reactive spectrum? Are you the type to just jump right into problem-solving mode? Or do you prefer to observe and analyze first? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Another key concept that really grabbed my attention was criteria. The book describes these as hot-button words or phrases that trigger strong emotional responses based on our values, our experiences, and our beliefs.
Think of criteria as the words that make our ears perk up or make us instantly tune out. They're like the secret codes to getting someone's attention and understanding what truly matters to them.
So it's like hitting the bullseye of their emotional radar, using language that speaks directly to their core values.
Precisely. And this is where things get really interesting, because a word that might be completely neutral to one person can trigger a strong positive or negative reaction in someone else. It all depends on their personal criteria.
Okay, I need an example. How can one word have such drastically different effects on different people?
Let's take the word efficiency, for example. For someone who values productivity and streamlining processes, the word efficiency might evoke feelings of excitement, motivation, and a sense of accomplishment. But for someone who prioritizes creativity and flexibility, the word efficiency might feel restrictive, limiting, or even soul-crushing. It all boils down to their individual experiences and what that word has come to represent for them.
That's a brilliant example. It really highlights how important it is to be mindful of the language we use and to recognize that words, they carry different weights and meanings for different people. So how can we actually figure out someone's criteria in real life conversations? Do we just straight up ask them, hey, what are your hot button words?
Well, while directness can be powerful, there's a more nuanced approach. Words That Change Minds suggests paying close attention to the language people use, especially when they're talking about things they're passionate about. What words do they emphasize? What kind of metaphors or analogies do they use? These can provide clues about their underlying values and what truly matters to them.
It's like becoming a language detective, uncovering those hidden criteria by carefully observing how people express themselves. Okay, now that we've explored level and criteria, let's move on to another fascinating pattern, direction. Words That Change Minds suggest that people are generally motivated in one of two directions, either toward something they want to achieve or away from something they want to avoid.
And this understanding can be a game changer when it comes to crafting persuasive messages or influencing decisions. So for someone who's strongly toward motivated, you'd want to highlight the positive outcomes, the benefits they'll gain by taking action, pen a vivid picture of what they can achieve, the goals they can reach, the exciting possibilities that await them.
It's like dangling a delicious carrot in front of them, enticing them with the rewards that lie ahead.
Exactly. But for someone who's more away from motivated, you'd need to shift your approach. Instead of focusing on the positive, you'd emphasize the risks of inaction, the problems they'll avoid, the potential dangers they can escape by taking your advice.
So it's like highlighting the thorns on the rose bush, making them aware of the potential pain or discomfort they can avoid by making the right choice. This is making me think about how we can use this knowledge to be more persuasive in our communication, whether we're trying to inspire a team or close a deal, or even convince our kids to eat their vegetables. It's all about understanding what makes people tick and tailoring our language to resonate with their individual motivations. And speaking of understanding what makes people tick, let's talk about the source patterns. This is all about how people make decisions. Do they rely more on their own internal judgment, or do they seek external validation? Words That Change Minds calls these patterns internal and external.
Internal folks, they're the independent thinkers. They trust their gut, their own analysis, their internal compass. They might not be as easily swayed by outside opinions or trends.
They're like the captains of their own ships, charting their own course, based on their inner wisdom and intuition.
Exactly. But external folks, they need more reassurance. They look to others for feedback, for guidance, for approval, or for data points before making a choice.
So they're more like navigators, consulting their maps and compasses, seeking input from others to ensure they're on the right track.
That's a great way to put it. And understanding these patterns can be incredibly valuable, especially in a professional setting. Imagine you're a manager trying to motivate two team members with very different source patterns, the internal person. They might thrive on being given a challenge and then being left alone to figure it out. They might even feel stifled if you micromanage them.
That makes sense. They need the freedom to explore, to experiment, and to trust their own judgment. But what about the external person? How would you approach them?
The external person. They might need more frequent check-ins, more feedback, and more reassurance that they're on the right path. They might value your guidance and appreciate knowing that you're there to support them.
It's like they need that external validation to feel confident and secure in their decisions. They might even thrive in a more collaborative environment where they can bounce ideas off of others and get that sense of shared responsibility. I'm starting to see how understanding these patterns can be a game changer in all sorts of interactions, whether we're leading a team or negotiating a deal, or even just having a more productive conversation with a friend or family member. It's about moving beyond assumptions, recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to communication, and learning to speak the language that resonates with each individual. But before we dive into even more fascinating patterns, we'll have to pause for now. Be sure to come back for the next part of our deep dive, where we'll uncover more communication gems from Words That Change Minds and explore how to apply this knowledge to create more harmonious and productive interactions in all areas of your life.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Let's continue unlocking those secrets of communication styles with Words That Change Minds.
I'm ready for more. We've already uncovered some fascinating patterns like level, criteria, direction, and source. What other insights does this book have in store for us?
Well, now that we understand a bit about how people are motivated and how they make decisions, let's explore how those tendencies actually play out in a work environment. Words That Change Minds dives into patterns like reason, scope, attention direction, and stress response to really shed light on what makes people tick professionally.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's break it down, starting with reason. What's that all about?
The reason pattern. It explores how people approach problem solving and decision-making. The book distinguishes between those who thrive on having lots of options and those who prefer following established procedures.
Oh, I can already see how this could create some interesting dynamics in a team. Imagine a group project where some people are all about exploring every possibility while others are itching to just get down to business and follow the plan.
Exactly. And Words That Change Minds, it highlights the strengths of each approach. Options people. They're often the innovators, the ones who challenge the status quo and come up with creative solutions. But they might also struggle with making decisions because they get caught up in exploring all the possibilities.
That sounds familiar. Sometimes I can get so lost in brainstorming that I forget to actually pick a direction and move forward. What about the procedures folks? What are their superpowers?
Procedures people, they find comfort in structure
Ah,
and predictability. They like knowing the rules, following a clear process, and having a sense of order. They're the ones who excel at tasks that require precision, attention to detail, and a systematic approach.
so it's like the options folks. They're the architects sketching out the grand vision. And the procedures folks, they're the builders, making sure the vision is executed flawlessly.
That's a great analogy. And recognizing these patterns in yourself and others, it can help you create more effective teams, delegate tasks more strategically, and avoid unnecessary conflicts. For instance, if you know you're working with someone who's very procedures-oriented, you'll want to be extra clear about expectations, deadlines, and the steps involved in a project.
It's all about playing to each other's strengths and creating a synergy where both innovation and efficiency can thrive. Okay, let's move on to scope. What does that pattern reveal?
Scope. It's about how people perceive the world around them and process information. It distinguishes between those who focus on the big picture, the general folks, and those who zero in on the details, the specific people.
Ooh, I have a feeling I'm a big picture person. I love seeing the overarching themes, the connections, the overall vision. Details tend to make my eyes glaze over.
You sound like a classic general. And as Words That Change Minds points out, general folks, they're often the visionaries, the strategists, the ones who can connect the dots and see the forest for the trees. But they might struggle with implementation, with getting bogged down in the nitty-gritty.
Okay, I can see how that could be a challenge. It's like having a brilliant idea, but then getting overwhelmed by all the tiny steps it takes to actually bring it to life. What about the specific people? What makes them tick?
Specific people. They are masters of precision. They thrive on details, accuracy, and following a step-by-step process. They're the ones you want on your team when you need something done meticulously and thoroughly.
So if the general folks are the composers, creating the symphony, the specific folks are the musicians, playing each note perfectly, bringing the music to life.
Precisely. And recognizing these scope preferences, it can be just as valuable as understanding the reason patterns. It can help you build more balanced teams, delegate tasks strategically, and avoid communication breakdowns.
It's all about appreciating the strengths of each style and finding that sweet spot where the big picture and the fine details come together harmoniously. Okay, I'm ready for more. Tell me about attention direction.
Attention direction. It reveals how people respond to stimuli and where they focus their energy. It identifies two patterns, self and other.
Self and other. That sounds intriguing. How do these patterns play out in communication styles?
Self-individuals, they're primarily focused on their own internal world, their thoughts, their feelings, and their experiences. They might not be as attuned to external cues or the emotions of others.
So they might appear less engaged in conversations or seem lost in their own thoughts.
It's not necessarily that they're not interested or not listening. It's just that they process information differently. They might need more direct communication, clear instructions, and time to process information internally before responding.
That makes sense. It's important to remember that there's no one right way to communicate. It's about understanding and adapting to different styles. So what about the other folks? How do they differ?
Other individuals, they're highly attuned to the people around them. They're sensitive to social cues, body language, and the emotional undercurrents of a situation.
So they're like emotional chameleons, picking up on the vibes and adapting their communication style accordingly.
That's a great way to put it. This makes them incredibly empathetic and skilled at building relationships. They thrive in environments where collaboration and connection are valued.
This reminds me of those friends who always seem to know exactly what to say to make you feel better or how to navigate a delicate social situation with grace. It's like they have this innate ability to read the room and connect with people on a deeper level. This is all so fascinating. I'm starting to see these patterns everywhere now. Okay, what about stress response? How does that factor into communication?
The stress response pattern, it explores how people react to pressure and challenges. Words That Change Minds. It identifies three main patterns: feeling, choice, and thinking.
I'm curious to learn more about these different stress responses. Let's dive in.
Feeling individuals. They experience stress very intensely, their emotions are close to the surface, and they might react quickly and impulsively. When they're under pressure, they need support, understanding, and a safe space to express their emotions.
So they might be more likely to show their stress outwardly, maybe becoming more vocal or visibly upset.
Yes. And it's crucial to remember that this is just their natural way of processing stress. It doesn't mean they're weak or incapable. It simply means they need a different kind of support than someone who's more thinking-oriented.
Absolutely. It's all about meeting people where they are and recognizing that everyone copes with stress differently.
Okay, fine. What about the thinking folks? How do they handle pressure?
Thinking individuals, they tend to approach stress more logically and rationally. They might seem calm and collected on the outside, even when they're feeling pressure internally. They often rely on problem solving, analysis, and a sense of control. To manage stress, they're like those unflappable characters in movies who can defuse a bomb with seconds to spare, while everyone else is panicking. But in real life, this ability to stay calm and rational under pressure can be incredibly valuable in any profession. This is making me think about how recognizing these stress response patterns could help us be more compassionate and understanding when dealing with colleagues or loved ones who are going through a tough time. Instead of judging their reactions, we can offer the type of support that best meets their needs. Wow, we've covered so much ground already, and I'm loving these insights. Before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, let's quickly recap the incredible patterns we've uncovered so far.
So we've talked about all these patterns, how they affect the way people communicate, what motivates them, how they make decisions. But what about how they work together in teams?
That's a great question. And actually, that leads us perfectly into the next pattern we're going to talk about, which is style.
Okay.
So style, it's all about how people prefer to work in teams.
Right. Words that change minds. It identifies 3 distinct styles: independent, proximity, and cooperative.
Okay. So let's break those down. Starting with independent, what does that look like?
Well, independent folks, they really thrive on autonomy. They prefer to work alone, set their own pace, and really take ownership of their tasks. They're highly self-motivated and often excel in roles that require focus, concentration, and a high degree of individual responsibility.
They're like the solo artists of the team.
Right, exactly.
They're amazing at what they do, but they don't necessarily need or want a lot of input from others.
Yeah, they might even find it distracting or even stifling to work too closely with others.
That makes sense. So it's not that they're antisocial or anything. It's just that they have their own way of working that works best for them. So what about proximity? How are they different?
Proximity individuals, they need a sense of connection and interaction to really thrive. They prefer to have, a defined area of responsibility, but they also value working alongside others, bouncing ideas around, collaborating on projects. They might find working in complete isolation to be demotivating or even lonely.
They're like the team players.
Right, exactly.
They enjoy the camaraderie,
right,
and they like to be part of a group, but they still need a sense of individual contribution to feel fulfilled.
Absolutely.
So then what about cooperative? Where do they fit in?
Cooperative individuals, they really take teamwork to a whole new level. They thrive on shared responsibility, collective decision-making, and a strong sense of unity. They believe that the whole is truly greater than the sum of its parts, and they're incredibly skilled at harnessing the collective wisdom and energy of a group.
So they're like the conductors.
Right.
They bring everyone together and make sure everything is working in harmony.
Precisely.
Love that analogy.
Okay.
So we've talked about independence, proximity, and cooperative, but are there any other teamwork styles?
Wow. Those are the 3 main ones that Words That Change Minds focuses on. But of course, there's always some nuance. And people might not fit perfectly into one category or another.
Right. It's more of a spectrum than a set of boxes.
Exactly.
So we've learned so much about communication styles today, from level and criteria to direction and source, and now style. It's amazing how much insight we can gain just by paying attention to the language people use.
It really is.
And the best part is, we can use this knowledge to improve our own communication, whether we're at work, at home, or just out in the world.
Absolutely. It's all about understanding where people are coming from and tailoring our communication to meet their needs.
And that's what makes Words That Change Minds such a valuable book. It gives us the tools to create more meaningful connections and build stronger relationships.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Subtle. If you're interested in learning more about communication styles, I highly recommend checking out Words That Change Minds by Shelle Rose Charvet. And don't forget to check out the show notes for links to the book, the audiobook, and some helpful study materials. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, please hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the deep dive for more insightful explorations of the books that can change your life. Until next time, Keep diving deep.